I'm Linwood Sloan, Director of Arts, Culture, and Tourism for the city of Harrisburg. And I welcome those of you who have come to the city's open house. The mayor opens his doors on the first and third Fridays of every month so that the citizens can gather in this crossroads and that we can bring arts, culture, and tourism activity. Here is the mayor in our presence, a literary man in his own right. Thus we bring you a day of spoken word and voice in this great hall. Just a couple of things about the hall for those of you who are watching through Channel 20. The galleries are curated by Nancy Mendez and Jeb Stewart. Behind us is the Harrisburg School District's Black History Exhibition. And they frame the mayor in his presentations in this space. To your left is the Community Heritage Gallery. And we're featuring in the Community Heritage Gallery a show of toys through recreation in 150 years, Rick, of recreation in Harrisburg and in our cultural life. And I ask you to look at from dollhouses to early Atari games there. Behind us is a retrospect on 150 citizens of Harrisburg who make up the real joy, verve, and sweat equity. It was done in 2010 for the sesquicentennial, a word it took me a long time to learn to say, for the sesquicentennial of Harrisburg, and it carries the mayor's vision that together we can, that it is the citizens that are the yeast and the glue of our progress. To your right and above is a wonderful mural by young brother Murray. In that mural, we asked Harrisburg High School students if they could reflect on Mount Rushmore and select 4 Africans or Americans of African descent. Who would they choose? They chose Frederick Douglass, Rosa Parks, Nelson Mandela, and Martin Luther King. And they chose specific moments. Martin Luther King in the Birmingham jail, Mandela speaking to the children of Soweto, which was a reminder that it was really young people who started that great Black and I'm Proud movement. Rosa Parks, who, even though we know her as a silver-haired octogenarian, actually started her activity when she was 21 years old, a reminder again of youth. And Frederick Douglass, who at 13 and 17 and 18 took his flight to freedom. Again, while we think of him as an old and elderly statesman, he started his activity as youth. So there's youth all around us here. Now, before I do the joy of the day, which is to introduce our poet laureate, I'd like to say that we know that you hope that spring is coming. It is. It's honestly on its way. We have been graced by these bird cages as emblems of and reminders that spring is coming, and I ask you each to take one when you leave this place. Put it either as a piece of art or in your yard as an omen that spring is coming. Spring is coming to the atrium also, you know, and if you look up, you will see on all floors we have curated this building, which was done in the 1984 to 88 style of Lawrence Halpern and open garden spaces inside of Public Works, that was done in the style of the Guggenheim with a central atrium, provides us with 4 levels of gallery space. The show has been curated by Nancy Mendez and Jeb Stewart, and please travel up on all of the floors if you can and when you can to see the. One last thing, these programs are on the first and third Friday of every month. So I invite you to come back and or watch, again, those of you who are watching at Channel 20, for March 21st, when two great poet laureates, Ms. Aoki and Mr. Nate Gatson, will be sharing their open voices. Finally, thank you to all to come. And this is an eating place, so on your Fridays, you can actually bring your lunch. I love the concept of New Yorican. New Yorican is a word that comes to us in the 20th and 21st century that implies and inspires how people see of themselves. New York, Puerto Rico come together in the words of our poet laureate, Rick Kern. If we were in another place, there would be a saxophone behind him playing while his words wailed. There would be the joyous sound of some drum or congo. You'll have to be the sax and the congo drum. Accompany him and welcome us to our poet laureate. Thank you.
Wow, what a wonderful introduction. And yes, even though I was born and raised in Harrisburg, I became an honorary New Yorican poet from my participation in the New Yorican Poets Cafe up there and in a few anthologies. What I want to do today is read some Harrisburg-based poems, as well as some of the other types of work that I do, and give you an idea of my style, because there are so many different poetic styles right now. And I'll start off with a short one. It's called Open the Door. Open the door. Taste the onion snow falling from violet industrial night, through matrix of phone lines, cable, and don't know what that one is. And falling on me and rusting lawn chairs and valiant charcoal grill, scattered in disarray, our little patch of yard, uptown Harrisburg nocturne, in C sharp for snow and taciturn, factory worker, ghosts. And this next one is a piece that is one of my jazz poems. I've written quite a few poems that are connected to jazz or are inspired by jazz people. And one of the things I have been doing too is working with a jazz group. And it's a really great, talented quartet called the Konoma Quartet. But this is another uptown poem. This is called 6th Street Coal Train Full Moon. Glissando sunset, light blue, uptown sky, round full moon on 6th, heading uptown on coal trains, through for the night. Through ghost town corridor, haunted tailor shop eyes are boarded windows past Hamilton Grill, out of state lotto played here is the wisp of the giant blues, jazz sorcerer, empty lots, oh say can you see Todd and Pat's, surviving past the empty red dot heroin pool hall, 8 ball, for all the players on 6th Street, uptown, down, past, more houses, uptown, with legal residents, young brothers, hip-hop swagger, cool summer night, corner streetlight. Lonesome bassline riff guides past dressed-up church folk into trains blues, as floating blue steam carries by the Value Mart, silent blue flashing light, pullover flies past the man Lahada to whining burglar alarm, red light neighbors out watching from corner, no big deal, no big deal. Down to nicer houses, past corner of beepers and hopeless burned out row home to uptown fine train steam engine ride, steam train ghost glide, uptown full moon, 6th Street, light blue summer night. Thank you. Thanks. And That one was published in a literary review called Drum Voices, which is from Missouri, of all places. And going from Uptown, this is one of the poems I've done with the jazz group, although I don't think we're doing it in this next incarnation. This one is from the Hill, from Allison Hill, from the Barrio up by Hummel Street. And I'll explain one term here that I use that some folks might be familiar with. Boricua. And Boricua means Puerto Rican. And it comes from the indigenous Puerto Ricans, the Taino. And some of my ancestors were Taino. And so I love the phrase. Anyway, when you're hearing Puerto Ricans speaking and you hear somebody say Boricua, it's a term of affection. It's a term of respect. And this is called The Mambo Resumes. He's floating up a ghetto row house street, almost purple, industrial twilight, and boom, his feet are on the ground. Aggressive mambo conga flies up the alley, pulls him along. Large Boricua and smaller friend jamming in the middle of empty lot. He walks straight at the conguero, stepping into island time, Puerto Rico time. Green chameleons skitter across window blinds, cackling hens, voices in Spanish. Somebody's cooking beans. The sun is confrontational. The air is loud. The speaker on top of the pickup blaring, huevos, verduras, and bam. The conga, cowbell vine, stops climbing. Tall conguero brother in crew cut rises, recognizes me. I smile, I know him too. Shake conga blistered hand. The conguero proclaims, Jesus saved me from cocaine, and the bookies don't know my real name. Laughter, high fives, and the mambo resumes. The mambo resumes. Island time, sipping cool coconut juice. Barefoot on hot sand, the mambo resumes. Chirping orchestra of birds and tree frogs, a sinfonia de coqui. Machetes on belts in a mountain cantina, island time. The mambo resumes. In the empty lot, young men pick up empty cans, accompany conga, cowbell, helix, carries us all out of the barrio, carries us up and away from cold weather country for a moment, a sacred moment. The mambo sustains. And I've done that also with percussion. Now this one is about my old neighbors on North 5th Street. And one of the things I was explaining to some folks who were asking me about what kind of poetry I write. A lot of my poems are stories, and they're stories about people that don't show up on most TV shows or films or what have you, including, of course, people from Puerto Rico. But these are my old neighbors from Uptown, and this is just called Doc and Ellen. The old lady is still there, sitting on a porch swing, long gone. Smoking Virginia Slims, taking notes of cars parking near our house, talking to no one in particular. I saw a blue car. I don't know that car. They're parked near your house. Ellen Crime Watch through cigarette haze, 78 years old, thick lens glasses, old-time Harrisburg. Her dad built the houses on this block. Brick duplexes, black and white photo of Ellen, young woman near rose bushes, our backyard, 1939. Her dad a carpenter. Got to be a foreman, only one on a Pennsylvania Dutch crew who spoke English. Built these brick houses, grew 6 rows of sweet potatoes in the lot across the street. Occupied by 2 houses now, he put those spuds in a barrel, buried for freshness. Ellen remembered names of famous Harrisburgers, but what she knew was office work, soda fountains, movies, and the Five and Dime downtown. Then marrying Doc, Melvin D. Miller, M.D. Miller, became Doc. Sheet metal worker, occasional sax player, roughneck. Doc showed up at their wedding day, bruised and dirty, his one suit all screwed up. Told me later he was drinking pre-wedding beers and some joker decided to make a crummy comment about the bride-to-be. They rolled out into the street. Doc told me, "I probably broke somebody's windshield with that guy's head." When we met Ellen and Doc, they were near the end of their tale. Ellen chain smoking most of the day on the swing, on the porch, staring at whoever drove by, only going inside half hour before Doc came home from hanging at a public golf course with some old buds from the VFW. Ellen would, every time, latch the screen door shut. A few minutes later, the nightly pantomime would begin, Doc trying to open the door. "God damn it, woman, open the door!" For a few minutes. On days when all the windows were open, we could hear Ellen chuckling, then saying, "Who's there? Okay, coming, coming." Every day, every day. Ellen and Doc, all on their own. Most of their friends on the other side. Good neighbors like us helping out here and there. Ziza, my wife, cut Ellen's toenails for her, almost passing out from the smell. Artie next door, funny, gay Artie, dying of AIDS, would play cards with Ellen, who once said to me, "You know, that Artie, he's a funny one. What's his story, Rick?" I told her, wasn't sure, maybe show business. Not telling her that Artie had been famous in Baltimore for his Pointer Sisters routine. The years marched on. The cigs caught up with Ellen. She went first, Doc inconsolable. Ziza made extra soup, brought him over for cookouts. Turns out Doc bought a microwave somehow. Hundreds of cartons laying around that I found after Doc checked out. Not long, I moved his car for a few days until we found his strange, estranged daughter. Creditors started appearing at their door, knocking and knocking. MasterCard, finally finding my phone number, called me almost begging for someone to seize. Turns out, Doc owed MasterCard $35,000. And I laughed so loudly, MasterCard and the rest never called again. And Doc left nothing but debt, an old car, and fond memories. Doc and Ellen, gone and gone. Like old Harrisburg, where a factory worker and a secretary could have a nice house in a nice neighborhood, walking distance to a union hall and a church and at least 4 bars. Doc and Ellen, working, yelling, dying in love and in debt. Memory, slow fade, slow fade. Thank you. And we do have a tune worked out for that one. And hopefully that'll show up on a CD someday, if we're lucky. Now, one of the other things I do is I write about certain themes, And I don't know if this is one of the ones that was published in the Berg or not, but I did want to read it because it is a true story. And I have a fascination with crows. And I've written a series of crow-related poems. And this one is called Crow's Midtown Battalion. They swoop in from the south, targeting the cars of state workers and apartment dwellers on a side street near the Capitol. Multicolored splatter. Crow has a new hobby. He and his Midtown Battalion align themselves on the telephone wires that run just above the unlucky vehicles. At the same time of day, just before dusk. And maybe there's another pattern. It does happen in sequence, probably follows a melody. No one interested in transcribing this one. Crow has a new hobby. He's tired of banking. And another theme, I guess, in my work is that I write poems to people. Okay? And so I want to read a couple of those. One poem that has been published in a bunch of places was a poem I wrote for my Puerto Rican grandfather, Juan de Morales. And he was he was a piece of work, and I miss him like crazy. So I wrote this poem partially. Well, you know what? I should mention the story. A few years after he died, I was thinking about him, and I got so overwhelmed that I had to pull off. I was driving, and I started crying, and I had to pull off the road, and I thought, man, I gotta do something. And then I started having these dreams, and then I wrote this poem, and then I didn't have the dreams anymore. So I wasn't, so I think I needed to do this. And the title of the poem is the name of grandfather in Spanish. It's called Abuelo, from my Puerto Rican grandfather, Juan de Morales. There's a tree growing from Abuelo's guitar, a flamboyant with vines curling around the neck, and its blood-red flowers fall into his song that sounds like a river and smiles like the moon. Abuelo is bronze, red-brown, white hair, eyes full of comets. He is slicing a pineapple with a big knife, and he's singing as he sings half of the day, every day. Everything in that kitchen is smiling at me. If he's not singing, Abuelo is humming while he reads, while he works, any damn time. He drives curvy mountain roads singing with one hand on the wheel, the other leaning on the window as on that mambo afternoon he drives up to the entrance of his little neighborhood, slows down, looks at me, puts a finger to his lips, puts on his glasses as we slowly glide up the driveway with Abuela standing and very carefully watching, looking at his glasses, scowls then smiles. Abuelo speaks and the words turn into hummingbirds. The force of his rage flashes like lightning and is gone. No signs of the anger, no scorched ground, no split trees, no signs of working hard from age 9 to his final years. 60 years of work, and he attempts to retire twice. Getting it right the second time while making all of us nervous since he hardly slowed down. The diabetes. The diabetes ordered him to stop drinking. And he did, most of the time. But occasionally charming a little whiskey out of adoring grandchildren and old friends who could hardly say no to the sweet old Taíno, Jíbaro man of the soil, oiga mi negro. It was that sweetness that infected your blood and made you too nice for this world. Oiga mi abuelo. I hear your voice singing some days, out of nowhere. And I pray there is another world so I can see you there. And that was more or less how it happened too. He was a really good musician, and he was always singing. He was always singing. He carried that guitar everywhere. I mean, you go to the store, you go to the mall, you go wherever, the guitar was there. And sometimes my poor it took us a while to figure out where he was hiding some of that scotch, and it was in fact in the guitar case. So the guitar has this, this different kind of symbolic power in our family. I'm not going to go in that direction. This is a poem I wrote for my mom, Margarita Morales Kearns, who was one of the founders of the Mount Pleasant Hispanic American Center and did a lot of community work and community outreach throughout most of her life. And she passed away last year. And I wrote this poem about 10 years ago. There was a testimonial dinner for her, and a bunch of her friends got together and pulled some stuff together. And then I wrote this for that event, and I'm very glad to say, I got to read it to her that time, and it actually bought me some respite at different difficult situations. Anyway, this is called The Meaning of the Visits. Many stories. I tell many stories, as you well know. I was born for this. From the first time you saw me smile, and I was smiling at you, Ma. I tell my friends about our little ranch house in the GI Bill suburbs. 6 odd people, 3 little bedrooms, a paneled basement. Paneled entertainment center for the neighborhood and other people mysteriously staying and, quote, visiting, unquote, for weeks and months at a stretch. These visits intrigued me, occasionally bothersome when I couldn't always get to my toys when they were needed, but I always liked the idea of the visitors, and I sort of knew why they were there. And I tell my friends that all of a sudden we had a family of 9, quote, visiting for a while, unquote. Of course, I speak of our dear friends, the fugitive tribu, huddling together because of something I could not have understood at the time, but you and Dad did, and you smiled it away so it didn't bother us. 15 people, plus 2 bathrooms, plus a family in crisis, would equal intolerable chaos for almost anyone else. I knew it at the time, but you kept smiling, Ma, and it took many years till I understood the power of your kindness, the dimensions of your faith, and the strength of your loving voluntad. So, among the countless thousands whose lives have been made so much better by your gentle heart and great vision, I take my place, grateful to you and smiling, because I love you, Ma, and I always will. And I have no concept of time. How am I doing?
Please read.
Oh, sure. Don't have to ask me twice. And one of the poems, one of the people I've written poems to is Dr. King. And I wanted to read this poem that Mayor Papenfuss did such an excellent job with about a month or so ago. But I thought it would be fitting if I read that one. And I should mention, Joyce, that I wrote this for that event in 2013, but almost like with my grandfather, I had a couple dreams where Dr. King showed up. And it's usually a signal to me that I need to do something. So this poem was it. This is called To This Struggle. I wish I could find the answer in a book. And there it would be in black and white, but no such luck. And I'm looking to you, looking up to you, Dr. King, today. When you led the Poor People's Campaign, did you see this coming? Did you see too many people working too many hours for so little, for so long? Did you see people, families with full-time jobs standing in line at food banks, the families of soldiers needing food stamps? Did you foresee that we would spend more, much more, on incarceration instead of education? It was April 1968 when you spoke to black sanitation workers from a Memphis union. You said, "We've got to give ourselves to this struggle to the end." You said this the day before the forces of hate stole you from us. And in our rage and grief, we forgot for a moment that you had crossed color lines, but not picket lines, to bring us all together for a few glorious seconds that we are hoping to see again. The struggle is not over, Dr. King. And I'll keep reading, I'll keep searching through those powerful and inspiring speeches you bequeathed to us in the hopes that we would avoid, quote, the racism, militarism, and materialism, unquote, you tried to warn us about. The struggle is far from over, Dr. King. And we will need your strength to make it to the end.
Take some questions?
Oh, sure.
What is it called?
I'll read something a little bit different. And this is one of the ones that was published in the Berg, I think. And it's a short one. I'll read it in English and in Spanish. It's translated into Spanish. And of all things, it's very popular in Argentina. So go figure. I wrote this poem for the great Spanish poet Federico Garcia Lorca. And this is called The Moon Rides a Black Horse. The moon is riding along the shore, thinking violins and howling wolves. The moon is riding a black horse, looking for a widow who sings the deep song, llanto of the unforgiving sea, bulería of smokestacks and isotopes. The moon wants a good red wine and a woman who can dance. And here's the Spanish version that my friend Mercedes Lenin translated. And this goes, La luna cabalga un potro negro. La luna cabalga a lo largo de la costa, imaginando violines y lobos aullantes. La luna cabalga un potro oscuro, buscando una viuda que canta la profunda canción del mar que no perdona. Bulerías de las columnas de humo de las fábricas e isotopos. La luna desea el buen vino rojo y también una mujer que pueda bailar. Thank you.
Some questions.
Thanks very much. Thank you.
You know, one of the earliest children's songs I learned was "All things shall perish from under the sky. Music alone shall live, never to die." The words of music, they flow through our atrium, cleans our souls, and fuel us. Some questions, some comments, some. Yes, sir.
Well, Rick, I've known you for a lot of years, and you've been a very vibrant part of the Harrisburg poetic community. And you know, I'm from the theater community. We kind of go parallel, and we run into one another, and we cross. We know. But I wondered, it's not so much a question, but I wondered if you could talk about the rich ground that Harrisburg is for so many poets. I was struck when I first moved here about 20 years ago. What an amazing area this is for poetry and all different kinds of poets.
Well, thank you. That's I'd be happy to talk about that. Harrisburg has a rich history. Okay, there's a lot of different kinds of people, a lot of different things that have happened. This was 40 or 50 years ago a thriving factory town. There were all kinds of factories and little stores and different kinds of communities, different ethnicities, different races living here. And there was always music here. Okay, that much I know. And my understanding is that there were poets showing up off and on throughout our history. And by the time I started becoming aware of it, I was running into poets just all over the place. I mean, we had a series that started in the Art Association in the late 80s. It was called The Paper Sword. And it was through connecting with them that I got to meet this variety of poets. And I mean a really good variety of all races, all classes, all ethnic and racial backgrounds. There's always been something about this town that has inspired that. There is an energy, there's an artistic energy here. And I don't know how to explain it, but it's here, and I've always seen it. Being one of the things I love is jazz, okay? Sarah Vaughan sang here, okay? Miles Davis came through here. Coltrane was here. Some of the greatest musicians this country has ever produced played here at different times. And you know what? I don't know what it is, but it's here. It always has been there. And I was very, you know, I'm very lucky to have connected to folks like yourself. And that artistic, one of the things that does happen too, is that when the artists can work together and they have a space, you know, to work together, it helps develop the art. And for instance, you and I collaborating way back when on my justifiably gone piece that was called Elvis Loves Nixon. It was about that relationship. And didn't really catapult me anywhere, but we had a lot of fun. We didn't. No, I tell you what. I saw these guys. They did my play out on the riverfront, and the actors literally ran off stage. It took me a half an hour to find these guys. But so then you know, I got to know, because I'm a part-time musician, I got to know a lot of different musicians, and so I've been collaborating with a wonderful jazz group called the Konama Quartet, and we're trying to do things, and we're hoping, you know, to bring in other art forms. You know.
Other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I want to hear a little bit about your vision for how you plan to, you know, bring your poet laureatedom to the city, and especially to young people. You know?
Well, thank you. There's a couple things I'd like to do, and one is to help develop creative writing and poetry workshops in the city. One based in the Latino community, one based in the African American community, open for everybody. And I think one of the great joys for me as a writer and as a person, as a community member, is being able to give young people that opportunity to develop their artistic skills. And there's so much talent here. You know, getting back to what every time we've done this, and I mean every time, we're always coming across these young people of all ethnic backgrounds, all races, with all kinds of talent. And that's something that's near and dear to my heart. So I'm hoping that we. It looks good. We've got a lot of people at the table talking about various things. But oops, I hope we can get those going. And other than that, it's just trying to collaborate with other artists. That's the thing.
We have time for one more question. If someone, yes, ma'am.
I'm afraid I don't have a question, but I need to thank you. Here I am on a Friday in the middle of meetings and phone calls and text messages, and I didn't expect for something to touch my heart. And I think I need to go home and write something for my mom.
Good, great. I'm very glad to hear it.
May I borrow your words? Here in the middle of the afternoon, with phone calls and messages and work, we can stop in the atrium of the city, in the center of government, for something to touch our hearts. That's the goal of the mayor's brown bag open houses. We thank the mayor and the first lady for stopping in their time. And we have to ask the poet to read one more poem before we say goodbye. Would you read one?
Oh, sure. Okay. Let's see. This is a poem. Now, one of the things I do also is I address social issues and various things. So some of my poems are sort of political, and this one is one of those. For a while, there was a lot of military testing on an island outside of Puerto Rico called Vieques, and this is and there was protests relating to that. And I was one of the protesters, and this is one of my poems talking about that, but also just talking about Puerto Rico. And the title of the poem is The Body of My Isla, and isla meaning island. The body of my isla. Inside the orchid, eucalyptus, bamboo heart of my Boriquen roams the ghost of Tio Nando, touching Titi Carmen on the shoulder before she cries herself to sleep every night. Thundering out of the dark eyes of the enchanted island is the Coquille Orchestra, 5 million translucent tree frogs singing as they must, aiming their love at the murderous F-18s dropping bombs and dripping poison on Vieques, residential bombing site. Roiling in the ocean blood of the home of my Taino antepasados y los que viven aún are the hopes and dreams of fruit and jautilla vendors selling their wares from the backs of dented pickup trucks. This is the body of my island. This is the blood of my love. Amen. Amen.
Amen. Thank you very much. Gusto,
Thank you.
So it's now time to dissolve the line between the artist and his community. Come forward if you want. Don't forget to take a piece of spring home with you to remind you that it is indeed coming. God bless you till we meet again.
Thank you. Thanks for coming.